Right, great to see you all joining us. Hopefully we've shaken out all those minor issues we had last week with the screen sizing, and today should run quite smoothly. Last week was a fairly simple affair to cover the very basics and let me really get used to the streaming technology, but this week we're going to step things up a gear and develop a full contact management app. Just a quick recap of last week. Remember, we set up an FTP connection. We created a database and a simple table with phpMyAdmin. And we created our very first page and added the frameworks and discussed meta tags. Today we're going to go on to making the database connection, and then we're going to start doing some actual pages, links, etc. So just give me one moment. Before we go any further, one thing I want to quickly do is, remember we have index.html we created last week. Now that's absolutely fine as an HTML file at the moment, but looking forward a few more webinars, we're really going to need that to be scriptable so we can do the security aspects. So first thing I'm going to do is rename that, and I'm just going to change that from HTML to PHP. Okay, right, so I just need to open up a additional page here. Just give me one moment. Should have had this done in advance, but sorry. What I need to do is get the database connection settings and the likes for this particular package, and then we can go ahead and start producing something that's hopefully going to be really useful for you all. Just getting a message from Ben there. What's the error? Can you just clarify that? Oh, I see. There's an error up there. Connection error up on the screen there. Yeah, quick refresh, Ben, and that has cleared that. It's probably just been related to me changing over to the scripting. I just want to give you a quick reminder when we talked last week about FTP route and web routes. Remember what I said was that your website route is not always the same as your FTP route. And that's quite important because I'm going to just show you now how the database interaction works within Wappler and why it's important that the FTP points to the web route specifically. So just give me one moment. I'm just going to pop something up on the screen. Right, there we are. We've got basic principle here. We've got Wappler down in our bottom left-hand corner. We've got our web server running up on the internet or whatever, and we have a database server. They might in fact be one and the same physical servers, but we'll think of them conceptually as two different things. How does Wappler communicate with the database server? And the answer is it doesn't do that directly. What it does firstly is it connects through FTP through to your web server, upload some scripts which deal with all of the connections, and then those scripts then link through to the database server. And then after those scripts have retrieved the information that's needed, that's then fed back to the web server, and when we're using Wappler itself, it returns that to the web server as a JSON response. So when we're running live, basically these scripts are talking to the database server back and forwards. However, when we're actually in Wappler, we're doing a route through, but the connections are exactly the same, which means that there's no differences between when we're working within Wappler or when we're in a live situation. So, just want to make a quick mention of a new feature that's been added to Wappler, and that is Git. For those of you who have no idea what that is, think of it as a backup system. think of it as a way of keeping a history of versions of your particular project. And if you look, see here, we've got a Git Manager icon now, and we can create what's called a Git repository. I'm just going to call this initial, and I'm not going to upload the whole repository. I'm just going to quickly show you how you would upload there. That's then committed those up to the Git repository, and that is stored. Now every time we make a change to that particular file, it will be logged, and we will be able to see that it's been changed, and we'll also be able to revert it back to a previous version if we need to. I also want to give you a very, very brief overview of the Bootstrap layout system. Sorry, that shouldn't have happened. Just give it. Those of you who have used Bootstrap before will find this fairly straightforward. Those of you who haven't, I think it's an important concept that you need to know about. Bootstrap grid system works on 12 columns. So there, in the most basic position, you've got what would be referred to as a container, and each container you will have a row, and then you can have up to 12 separate columns within each of those rows. Those columns can be 1 unit big, or 2 unit big, or 3, right through to having 1 wide 12 unit big column. And that allows us to lay out the information on the screen, and we'll be using a lot of this column, row and container methodology. And similarly, where it comes in really useful is that you can have device specific column sizes. So we could actually say that your extra small devices like phones will be a column width dash XS, mean extra small, and we could say that is 12 wide, which means that we'd have 1 object on the screen. Right through to the larger devices called large, we could perhaps say it would be 2, so you will get 6 objects on screen. Great for laying out images and things like that, which will scale automatically as you move from large and small devices. So okay, enough of that. Let's make a start. I mentioned about columns, so let's start with our container, and we're going to create a row, and we're going to create a column. And the first thing that I'm going to be looking at to do here is to create a record within our database that we set up earlier. Just as a quick reminder for those who weren't here last week, or those who have forgotten, what was a database structure? Last week I used PHP MyAdmin. This week I'm just going to demo Heidi SQL, which is one of the many free database management systems available on the internet. Remember, we had a contact ID as a primary key, which is an integer, and then we have first name, last name, and email. We're going to keep this fairly simple at this stage, and that's the structure that we're going to be using. So the first thing we're going to have to do is to actually create our form, which is going to be set. Yep, okay, sorry, apparently I'm just going to drag my face down to the corner here because I'm blocking things. My apologies. To those who couldn't see it, we've got the Git Manager up here, which is the Git upload that we did earlier, and you can see there the initial message. Just give me one moment. I've got that's it. Sorry, I'm just battling with webcams and things at the moment. I was a little bit undecided whether to use it or not, but right, so we're going to do an insert action, and our insert action is going to be to send a single record down to the database, and I'm going to do that in what's called a modal. Those of you who know what modals are, then you bear with me while I simplify things. Think of it as like a pop-up. So we'll be able to pop up a screen with a form in. We're going to then fill in that form, and then we're going to send that to the database. So we've got our container room column already set up here, and that is going to be where we're going to be dropping a button. Simple button, and we're going to call that button new record. Let's just give it a bit of colour so we can actually see what it looks like. We'll just make it a blue one for the minute. A little bit too high on the screen, so let's use the sizing feature, the spacing feature, and I'm just going to add some space above that button so that we can have it just down from the screen. Just going to do a quick save. Right, now we're going to add this modal. So we're going to go into our add component. We can just type in modal, and there we got dynamic modal, and we're going to add that. And this creates this simple pop-up form, shall we call it, which we're going to use to add our new record. So we're going to call that new contact. Let's give that header a little bit of colour, shall we, just to make it stand out a bit. So background colour we're going to make as blue. Let's stick with blue, and we'll just give the text a bit of colour as well, just so it stands out better. We'll make the text light. Within this, we're now going to place a form. So let's just take that paragraph out. We don't need that at a moment. And instead, we're going to insert a form. Everybody following okay? If anybody's got any queries, please feel free to just shout up. We're now going to add 3 fields to that form. We're going to add, I'm just going to keep them very, very simple at the moment, straightforward text inputs. Quickest way to put 3 in is just to duplicate them. And then we're going to have to reflect the 3 fields that we're going to, that we had within our database. So if we just remind ourselves of those names, first name, last name, and email, all in lowercase. Let's try and retain that. So our name for this one is first name, last name, and email. I do like to just change those IDs as well, because we can recognize everything easier. So I just tend to prefix the name with the word ID. Okay, so it's quite clear then exactly which of these fields refer to what. Our email field, we can change from text and actually make that an emailer field. What that will do is that will enforce a validation that only a email address can go in. If it's not an email address, then a validation will fail and you won't be able to go on any further. Stick a placeholder in. So our placeholder will be first name, second place holder will be last name, and lastly our placeholder is going to be email. Now we could, of course, had titles here. We could have had columns in to allow us to have a prompt there. But as this is a creation form, it will always start blank. So we can just use the in-field placeholders as the prompts within them. Just going to point something out that was mentioned earlier in the forum about submit button versus click. If you notice that the modal, when it's created, has these buttons created at the bottom here, but these buttons are not within the form. So if we simply made that into a submit button for the form, nothing would happen because it's not within the form. So we either have to drag that button inside the form, or what we could actually do is add a click event to it. A click event, and within that click event we could force a form submit. But we'll not do that for the moment. So I'm going to delete that button. I've dragged the wrong button in, haven't I? Sorry about that. That button should be down there. And I'll just add the new button in here. That should simply read add. Excuse me. That's a pop back in that modal. I'm just going to give that button a bit of colour again. Otherwise, it's amazing how quickly you can lose them. So that's our basic modal. We have three fields there and an add button. Not the prettiest of forms, I've got to accept, but we've got to work within time restraints. So obviously I can't spend a long time with layout at this stage. We've also got to look at validations, and that's really important. I think it's important that you do things properly right from the start. Remember, we have a first name and last name field which were a maximum of 60 characters, and an email field which I recall was 120 characters. We need to make sure that people don't add anything more than that in than is allowed. So we can actually now go into validations. If we go into validations, validation rules here, we can actually say this first name is required, and that first name should be a maximum length of 60 characters. You'll see the little message along behind here, and we just have to change that to 60. We can do the same with the last name. Validation rule, we're going to require that, and we're going to have a maximum length of 60 characters. And lastly, with the email, we're going to make that again mandatory, and we're going to insist that that is no more than a maximum length of 120. Let's save that. Oh, I'm told now this, I've learned something today. Thank you. I presume that's George. The fact that it's a bracket, 0 brackets, means that the entered number will be used, and apparently you don't need to change that. It will automatically substitute the number that you put in into that particular position. So that's brilliant. Thanks for that, George. Learned something today then. So there basically we have our form set up. Next thing we need to do is to send that to a server action. So let's pop over here, our third icon down, server connect. Let's add a new action, and let's call that insert. First thing we're going to have to do is to create our very first database connection. I'm going to call that SCRUD. Search, create, read, update, delete, by the way. It does sound like it might be a disease, but I'm going to show you it's not. Accessing a MySQL database. And then I'm just going to have to pop up that previous screen with my database settings in. Just to show you what they were. Remember, we created, this is our server name. So I'll just copy that. Our database. I'm just copying this from another screen now, which is the same as a username, and if I remember from last week, password was as I've put that. We can ignore the certificate side of things for a minute because that's not relevant to the connection that we're making. Prepared statements is really to do with if you're using views and the likes, and it handles some of the internal, shall we say, of the connection. If we hit test, fingers crossed, we've got a good database connection, and we save that. Now we see, very importantly now, you see we've got a link symbol here, and that's gone blue. That tells us that that has been saved as a separate external file, so we don't need to reset that connection every time we want to access a database. We can simply reuse that connection over and over again. So yes, Magic Bytes, our database connection is used multiple times. We'll be using that for every connection that we do from now on. So the first thing we want to do is create an insert action. So actually, before I do it, I'm just going to go back to that form and just remind, we need it to be a post form. I'll just do that, but actually just want to give it a new name. I'm going to call it form insert, just simply because we're going to have a lot of forms on this screen eventually, and we will get a little bit confused. So right, our database action now will be, we want a database insert. Just make sure that action file that we've created before is saved properly before we do that. So back to our database insert. We don't need to worry about naming, call it whatever you want. So we'll just leave that with insert one. Our connection will be the one that we set before. And what we find now is that when we go into insert, Wappler already knows that we've created a contacts table because it's read that database schema and it's got all of the information there. I've just been told get that pip out of the way. Sorry. And we can see there was 3 names there. But of course we haven't got any information as to what's coming from the form. And that's the reason why I recreated or changed the name of that form. If we go into globals now, we can go on linked page. And this is the page that we're dealing with. From that, it will tell us which forms are available within there. And if we hit import from form, we'll see now that those post variables have been imported from that form, and also the validations, that tick indicates there is a validation with them. Which means now when we try to do our insert action, these post variables have been pre-created for us. I'll just go through them again just so you can see they are identical. And now our email. So we can save that now. That's basically the whole database side of things created. It will take that form, it will send the information over to your server connection, it will insert that information into your database, and then return back to your App Connect page over here. So that was a really simple way, and I've never come across a piece of software that will actually make that process so simple. Because all we need to do now is go over here, make that a server connect form, add that server connect as an insert action, and save that. This is running from a modal. So what we've got to remember is that we've actually got to fire that modal up. So we're now going into that new record button. and we're going into what's called the dynamic events. What we want is when that button is clicked, we want to be able to open that modal. So all we got to do is literally, as I spoke, the process, that's exactly what we do. On a mouse click, our action will be to show that modal. So helps if you add it. So basically now I'm just going to quickly show you on a live page that button will open that form for us. So now we need to decide what's going to happen there. Our form will open. Our button is set to a submit button. We've got, well, we haven't, no, we need to set that to a submit. Our form will then pass that information over to our insert action and insert that information. But we're not quite finished there, because we also need to think, well, what's going to happen after we've done that? Is that form going to just sit on the screen, or is it going to be closed? And the answer is we can go into the dynamic events of the form itself. So there we've got the form. We can go into dynamic events and see now we have server connect. And what we can actually do is trap the replies coming back from that server connection that we created over here and do an action as a result of that. So the ones we're going to be dealing with are error and success. And what I want to do is put in a little message up saying error, if there's for some reason a server error. But on a success, I want to actually close this modal. I want to clear this form completely. What we're going to do then is, first of all, I'm going to add a great little element here called notify when I find it. Notifications. Oh, come on, Brian, learn to type. Notifications, and this deals with all of the notifications we might need to after we've been doing these server events. So back to our dynamic events. Oh, sorry, I should be on the form, not the modal. Dynamic events, server connect. In the case of error, then we're just going to want to have a warning. And we're just going to have a message come up saying error. Notice those single quotes. If it's a literal, it's absolutely essential that you put those single quotes in. But more importantly, in the event of success, we want to do a little bit more. Because first of all, we want to perhaps pop up a message saying record added. And then we want to just reset that form, because we don't want the text to be there next time we open that modal. And then last of all, we're going to hide that particular modal. Okay, so let's have a save of that. So now we should be able to pop that form up, add some information into the form. We should be able to hit the add button. It should insert that into the database, and then we should get the appropriate confirmation message come back, provided I've done my job properly. So let's have a look and see what happens. New record. Brian English, me at mail.com. Click the add. Record added. It's closed that modal. I know that screen's not very pretty at the minute. We're going to be adding a lot more to it. And if I pop open Heidi and look at the data, you can see that information has been added into the database. incredibly simple way to manage data within Wappler. If anybody wants to, feel free. If you go to that web address, datalogistics.uk/index.php, feel free to add some details in there if you would like, and just see that it works in the way that I say. In the meantime, I'm going to go on to the next stage. So we now got some information on the screen. So why not now list that on the screen? So our next section for this is going to be listing the information that's in the database in a table. So again, we're going to go back over to our Server Connect. We're going to add a new action, and this is just going to be list all. Our steps is simply going to be, first of all, our database connection, and we're going to select that one that we created earlier. We don't need to recreate that. And our database action is going to be a database query, and that query is just going to simply get every bit of information from the contacts database, and let's maybe sort them on the last name, ascending. No conditions required at this stage. That's straightforward. And notice that there hasn't been any comments in a while. Is everybody happy, or have I lost connection with comments? Can somebody just confirm you're hearing everything okay? Thanks for that. Great. I was just a little bit worried that the connection had died or something like that. Okay, so we've created our very simple database query. Yeah, Ben, you're right. I need to put that button back in the column, don't I? There you are. So our next thing is going to be, we're going to be adding this list of all the records within the database. So let's add another container after, with a row and a column. Spend a little bit more time on this. Containers, they can either be fixed, or if you want, you can make them be fluid, which means they'll go absolutely full screen. You can give them each a unique ID so you can identify them better. I'm going to call this one ID table, just so we can see straight away here which particular container we're dealing with. And what I want to do now is to simply generate a Bootstrap table. Incredibly simple this. We've got going to generators, Bootstrap for table generator, and we're going to, sorry, no, it would help if actually I made a server connection first. My apologies. First of all, we're going to make a connection to our list all action. Get all, we'll call it. What we've done is we've created a connection, app connect through to the server connect side of things. Now we can go into our generators, Bootstrap table generator, pick up that connection. What I'll do is I'll just, for the moment, let it show all of the information that's being pulled across. We'll throw the kitchen sink at it while we're busy. Okay, that. Now there should be a record in there which tells me that I've probably forgotten to save that server action. Let's just refresh that. Okay, give me one moment. Where's our problem here? Anybody else spotted what it is? We've definitely got a record in there. Apparently I've switched off App Connect. Sorry, yes. Well spotted, George. Pressure of all of this. You missed the obvious things. Right, so there's the entry that I added. Neil Rigby, thank you very much for adding that one in. Blah, 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 blah. That's my type of entry. Great. So now we can see that we've got our list of contacts that have been added via the new record application. And we know that's working because some people have added records in for me, which is brilliant. I'm just going to again add a little bit more space in there just to tidy things up. Right, we really need now to look at how to manage searching. I'm just going to bring my happy little face back on because you haven't seen me for a while, and sorry, I've just accidentally dragged the main screen there. Is that still okay for everybody? I want to be able to delete some of those items, and I also want to be search on some of these items. So let's just add another container before that. Row, column, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a form field in there, a simple text input, and I'm going to call that filter, because what we're going to do is we're going to use the input of this form here, or it's not a form, just a text field, as our search term to search these. We're fine at the moment at 3, but it could have been hundreds in here, so we want that search. So that's a text field. I'll just put a placeholder in it for search term. So what we've got to do now is we're going to alter our list all server connection to filter the results based on whatever is typed in here. Now before Wappler, that would be a bit of a pain to do, to say the least, but it's incredibly simple now, because the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create a global in here, and we're going to call that filter to match the field that we've created over here. I like to keep them matching just so we know what goes with what. And now in the query, we're just going to add a condition, and that condition will be the first name contains the filter. But we can go a bit stage further there, because we can add another rule and say, or the last name contains the filter. And then even a stage further, we can ask for the email contains the filter. So we're effectively managing to search on 3 fields there. You notice at the moment they are just showing as ands. We just click on the or, and you'll see now that we have or. So if we were to type in blah, for instance, the search will look for the letters BLA in either the first name, the last name, or the email. And that is literally all it takes to set up a free text search within Wappler. Now bear in mind that this is not a Google search, this is an exact match search, but it's a really, really powerful feature. The only other thing we've got to do now is make sure that that value for a filter here is passed over to our server connection. You'll see now that we've gone into server connect, that filter field that we created over here is now reflected over here. And what we do is we pass that value over simply by saying it is the, when I find it, text input value. Let's be tidy. I really should have given that a name just so it's absolutely clear what we've got. We'll call that ID filter I think that'll make it a lot clearer exactly what I'm doing. That filter value is the value of whatever is in ID filter. So let's save on that. Let's make sure I've saved that server connection. And now if we hit the open in browser, we've got our 3 entries there. We've got a prompt for a search term there. And if we search for blah, so as soon as we type in, the search is instant and it will give us the exact matches on that. If we wanted to look for Neil, we could just put IG. And because IG matches here, in actual fact here as well, then that search will instantly search that table, filter that table, and give you the appropriate search results. Any questions up till now? Yes, George, I know I could do it in live view. I just wanted to show it running in a browser, because actually now people can go back to that previous URL that I gave out and try that filter out themselves if they want. Might need to refresh the page, but yes, you're absolutely correct. If you want to test it, you can actually do it within live view as well. Thanks for that, George. So now we're looking at, I forgot to mention it, but we were talking about SCRUD, which is, say, it sounds a horrible disease, but it's not. Search, create, read, update, and delete. The next thing that we need to do is how to delete a record. All I'm going to do is I'm going to add an extra column in here, and I'm going to stick a button in there, and we're going to do a delete action. So let's just add another header in after that, and let's call that delete, just so we know what we're doing. Come on. So that's added in the head of the table, and if we go down the body of the table, we can again add after another cell. We'll just leave that text as cell at the minute just so we can see it. What we're going to do is we're going to put a delete action into here. I'm just going to put that live view off for the minute. So let's go into there. We'll take that out. What we want to do is, we're going to insert inside that a form. I'm doing this as a form as opposed to a link because we're going to be showing how to do it as a link later. Within that form, we're going to have a button, and we're also going to need a text field. And the reason why we're going to need that text field is we need to pass the unique ID of the record. Didn't mean to do a form group, my apologies. We're going to pass the unique ID of the record that we want to delete. Seem to have gotten a bit of a mess here. Just excuse me one moment. Yep, everything seems to be all right. So now we have a button. I'm going to make that red. Just so we can see it, and it's a good warning colour, red. Come on. bit of a sync issue there. Not so worried too much about it. That button is going to be a submit button, and its style is going to be bright red. This field here is eventually going to be a hidden field, but before we hide it, I just want you to be able to see how it functions. So what we need to do is have the unique ID of the record that we want to delete stored in this particular field. So if we select that, and what we're going to do is now we're going to give it a dynamic attribute, and the value will be, make sure we get the right one, the repeat of the body, we want it to be the contact ID. So you see now that these fields are holding the unique values for each of those particular records, and they don't follow 1, 2, 3 because obviously we're ordered by our last name as opposed to the record ID. So let's just hide that now. So that field we actually don't want to see. So let's first of all give it the correct name. Just going to give that a 2 at the end because we already have contact ID and I don't want two IDs clashing or we get an error report on it. And we want to hide that. So now we have our 3 buttons, a hidden value to send, and all we need to do now is send that over to our server connect end. So we need another action here. That's going to be delete. Just rename that. Our steps are going to be add that database connection again, and this time we're going to need a database delete action, and that delete action is going to be, so no, we suppose we should really pull those globals over, so give me a second. That's form delete, isn't it? A lot of thinking on the fly here, folks. I'm sorry. Save that. As we did before, globals, our link page is index. This time we want the delete form. We can import that value through contact ID. And now when we do our delete action, it writes it for us basically. Delete from contacts where contact ID is equal to the value of the contact ID that we are sending from that delete form. Really, really straightforward, that one. All we need to do now is to tell that button to use that appropriate server action. Let's save that. Double check that. I'm going to pop that up in the browser again just so you can see it working in real life. And let's delete me. Okay, that hasn't worked. I'm just going to find out where that problem is then. Anybody spots it, please do let me know. And aha, yes, well spotted. One of the things that I've forgotten to do is, within that action, I need to make sure that we have refreshed the database. What's happened is I've actually deleted it, but we've forgotten to, or I have forgotten to refresh that database after the delete action. And again, we're back to our server connect actions, our events, server connect, success, And on success, we want to say, right, okay, first of all, record deleted. And then the next thing is we need to refresh this server connection here. We do that simply by reloading it. And just in the interest of completeness, because it's so easy to do, we will add an error option in as well. Okay, everybody all right up till now? I'm going to pop that back up in browser and goodbye blah blah, and you see now that the record is deleted. We have the confirmation of deletion and the screen is refreshed. Really should change the name on that button. No, it doesn't look good. Should say delete. Great. Anybody, any questions? Right, last one, which is I won't say the most complicated one, because I don't think any of this is massively complicated. Wappler makes things so easy. But what we're going to do is the update part of the operation. Yeah, it's a valid point. What about a question, are you sure you wish to delete? Yeah, that would be really useful. I'm not going to actually do it because I'm conscious of, we do have time restraints. I'm running a fair bit over what was anticipated. How you would do that would be that delete button, rather than going straight to the delete action, would call up a modal. And you would embed that form with the delete button and that ID within the modal, and you would also have the cancel button within the modal as well, as you have here. So you would add an extra stage into that. I may well be able to cover that at a later date, but I'm running probably about 10 minutes over what was expected. There are examples of that on the forum, so if anybody isn't sure what to do, it's on there. If you get really stuck, by all means, just give me a shout on the forum itself. No, I won't be doing sorting today. There is a video on the YouTube channel that I did nearly 12 months ago, which covers sortable headers, etc. But again, time constraints at the moment. I don't think we're going to be able to do that. Yes, I'm going to try and keep this to an hour. That leaves me about 7 minutes to do the next stage, so I really need to get on with that. So I'm going to pop another container in after that one with a row and a column. And what we're going to do is this is going to be our update form. Got a question about navigation menus. Well, I won't be covering that, but bottom line is, yeah, great, Tom. You would create that navigation page and then just push it out as an SSI or a PHP server-side include, and then you could include that into your subsequent pages as a common menu. Right, so I'm going to do things a little bit backwards this time into what we've done, because I'm trying to show as many different techniques as possible. I'm going to create the server action first here. And our server action in this case is going to be the update action. And we're also going to need a second one, which is going to be get single. And that one will get a single record based on the ID that's been sent. We'll do that one first. Database connection, we're going into our usual, And then our database action was a simple database query. And what we're going to be sending to that query via a GET on this occasion is going to be the contact ID. You'll understand soon why we're not using a form post. We're using a GET action, which is a slightly different way of doing things. Our query now will be simply our contacts table. Again, we'll just keep things simple. We'll get all the information that we need, but the condition will be that the contact ID is equal to that contact ID that's been sent. So our form will be sending, for example, 3, contact ID 3, to this action. That will then retrieve that one record that matches that contact ID. Save that, and then of course the other thing we need to do is to save the information when it's submitted. I'll come back to that one in a moment, I think. No, we'll do that one now. So we'll just make sure that everything's saved off first. Our update, that will be coming as a post. And we'll be sending it 3 variables. We're going to be sending it the forename. We're going to be sending it the last name. And we're going to be sending it the email. Again, keep making sure that we keep those names the same as everywhere else, just because, excuse me, it makes it much easier to see what you're doing. We can add the similar and validation in if we want at the server end, and then export those validations to App Connect. I would normally do that. I'm conscious of time. The process is exactly the same as we used before, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to skip that particular stage for the moment. George is reminding me, if I create that database update action first, the post variables do actually get auto-created, which is my omission. Sorry about that, George. Too much to think about. There's so many brilliant little shortcuts that even after, I've been using Wappler now for 12 months, and even now I learn new things every day, and secondly I forget about great little features that are there. Because you don't use them every day, you forget about them, and it's great to have a little reminder occasionally that these things are there. This occasion we're doing a database update. If we go into our update options, we've got the contacts. Now, Wappler is clever enough to know that contact ID is the key field, so it's not going to offer to update that. You'll see now we've got the first name, the last name, and the email post values all set up. And it's even clever enough to realise that the contact ID will be the contact ID that is being sent as a post value. And you know, it's because I haven't filled that in. I'll just get out the forename because that was wrong. It's added that contact ID in automatically for us. Just make sure that I haven't made that mistake on the first name. So that's the update action. All we're going to do now is link all of that to a form, get the right information in and out. I'm going to use on this occasion a Bootstrap creation form. So first thing we need to do is to tell this App Connect where the form's data is coming from. So we're going to create a server connection, and we'll call this con get single, because we're just calling a single record through this. Our action is going to be that get single action that we created before. So remember, that gets sent to contact ID, and that contact ID is used to retrieve a single record. See down here, the contact ID field has been dragged down, and what we need to do is tell that we've got to use within the table. Make sure you don't use these connections up here. Table, the contact ID, and what that does is that binds the value within here to the server action. So that would be sending option 2, that would be sending option 3, that would be sending option 4. Do you know when you've just got that feeling that there's something not quite right there? That binding is right, I do believe. So having done that binding, I don't want that to auto load, because we don't want it to just automatically load some random record. What we want to do is only to load the record that we choose when we want to choose it. So for the moment, we're not going to actually load anything when that server connection is first seen within App Connect. Okay, we're over here now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop another button in here. And that's going to be update. Because we don't actually need to see the value that's in there anyway. Sorry, my typing's bad today. My typing's bad always. Let's take that text out. We now see our button. The default button at this particular occasion, and we'll just make it blue so we can see it. So what we want to happen is that when we click this update button, we want the form here to be populated with this information, and then we need, when we save it, we obviously need that to be written back to the thing. Yeah, just looking comp with future Visio show Git version control. I did briefly demonstrate that right at the very start, but there's still a few new features to be added, I understand, by the team, so I prefer to cover it in more detail when the whole product or the whole process is completed. Right, so we're in our form. We need to have that update form, and I'm just going to use Bootstrap for form generator. So our server action will be update, and those fields will be populated from get single. We see now is that you've got all of our fields there. We certainly do not want to be doing anything with the contact ID field. So we'll just hide that. And then we've got the options to update that. And there's our form created automatically. If we save that, if I've done everything and I haven't forgotten anything now, if we get a form there, if we click on one of these, no, we haven't done that yet, have I? Trying to hurry here because time's getting on and it probably isn't a good idea. What we want to do is when that update button is clicked, we need to activate an event, and what we need to do is to reload that event. So remember we said we wouldn't auto load it. Now we're using a click event to load that information in. And that should then Just one moment, I think I know where I've gone wrong here. Forgot to add in there the contact ID for that particular record. So as we saw before where we had that earlier contact ID, when we're reloading this we need to tell it which record that we want to add, and then that hopefully now that's better. So now we can see as we click the update button, it selects the appropriate record so we can update that record. But that looks a little bit messy, doesn't it? Because we don't want that update form to be displayed all the time because it's going to look a bit messy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hide that update form until the button is actually clicked. Don't know what that's doing in there, but never mind. That's the container that is important to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable which I will use to toggle the appearance of that particular form. So we'll call it var show update. We're going to give that initial value of 0, just a static value of 0. What we're going to do is we're going to use that to make this particular container appear or disappear. And how we're going to do that is, first of all, we're going to give it a dynamic attribute that it is hidden if that var show is equal to 0, which is the default position. So you will not see that form at this particular stage, but we need it to appear when we click on the update. So if we actually go to that update button and back into its actions, what we can do is we can say when that button is clicked, set the value of that to 1. So it's not 0, so that should make that form. So I'm just reading a message here. Is it possible to create one CRUD table, kind of a template, and use it for different database tables? You would have to make sure that the fields match. So to be honest, probably making everything match up would be more difficult than creating it from scratch. Been on now because I've been talking an awful lot, but as you may have saw from the video I did, you can do this whole process in around 15 minutes. So it probably isn't worth trying to template it. But going back to that action there that we had, we're going to have this, it's going to show, set the value to 1, which should then make that particular column appear. You see there, we click on the update and the appropriate person's details are shown, and also that form is revealed. We now want to be able to close it as well, so I'll just take the live view off for the moment. I want to just add a bit of space in there because it's irritating me that everything's scrunched up. We've got a save button here. That save button is a submit button, but I'm also going to add a little dynamic event to that. On a mouse click of the save button, I want to set that value back to 0. So what I'm saying is when we hit save, it's going to do that server action. It's going to send that information back to the server, rewrite that record, match on the contact ID, and at the same time, it's going to hide this column. So there's our record. And when we save it, you'll see that it closes that button again. And just to make sure that everything, we'll just make it a Neil Rigsby's. And there it is. Again, that shows me that I've forgotten to do one other thing. I need to refresh that table. So on the click event of that, we're going to then reload get all. So we go update, save. Yeah, I think I've added a refresh there, but obviously added it in the wrong place because it's actually refreshing before we're updating. I should really have added that obviously to the server success, not the save button itself. So we saw that process before. We've got the form. We're going back down to the dynamic events, server connection. On the success, we've got, let's say, our message, because I completely forgot about that. So we can say success, or updated, probably better. And then we can force that refresh of that table. Let's just save that. Well, I said for interest of completeness, let's just put the error one in as well. It'll only take a moment. This is the message you put in that you hope you'll never ever see, but it's very helpful to be there just in case something goes wrong. Okay, let's try that again. Let's open that browser. Let's try Neil again. Let's add an S on, save it, and you see that when it's been refreshed, it's there. And we take it off again, and we save that. So there we are. We've done the very basic features that we said. We've got a search. We have the ability to create a record through the modal. We have the read action, which will read everything from the database. We have the update action with opening and closing the fields there, and we also have a delete action. I think only other thing I mentioned that I was going to show you how to do is how to disable a button temporarily while an action is occurring. So let's do is that save button there we're going to disable temporarily so that we don't double submit it, basically. And that's probably even more important on the new record action so that you don't create a double action. So let's go back into Wappler here, into our save button. And what we've got now, if we go down, so we've got inline and growing spinners. We're going to use an inline spinner. What we're going to do is we're just going to have a little spinning arrow in that button while the record is being submitted. So that's a border spinner will be shown. And what we're going to actually do now is something that a lot of you might not have looked at before, and that is while server action is executing, that action will show. And you see there now we've got that little spinny button just going to quickly fire that up. See now, sorry, it's actually so quick, these servers, that you don't see it, but I can show you there would be a spinning button normally there showing that it's happened. And if you want to go a stage further, you can also disable that button totally, and it's exactly the same. On the button you could say dynamic attributes, display, hide it when the state is executing. So that will make sure that you never double submit things. When you click that button, you'll get the warning spinner, and you also hide the button itself. Okay, we're now at an hour and a quarter. I think we've covered enough for the moment. And yes, fair point from George. Rather than hiding it, we could have just disabled it instead. I'll just quickly show you how to do that. Disabled. We could have just simply said it's disabled while it is executing. So rather than making the button disappear, you just disable that button temporarily until the save is complete, and then it will go back to normal. I know it looks a bit untidy, that screen. I was hoping to have 5 minutes to make things look a little bit better than it does. But I'm very happy now. If anybody wants anything, to answer any questions. I'll be obviously uploading this to YouTube probably within the hour. And I'll put a link on the group to it for anybody who has been unfortunate enough not to catch it or wants to go through it again, because I think there was a lot of learning in there, and I think certainly those that are newish to Wappler, I hope will have got a lot of benefit from it. Okay, so next week we're going to be looking at security. Because obviously you want to make sure that people don't go and update your databases, etc. for you. So that should be fairly straightforward. But until then, thank you very much for joining me, and I really enjoyed doing that. See you next week.